Hey guys, tonight we're going to breathe in a past you probably don't want anywhere near your lungs. The Black Death, the plague that swept across Europe in the mid-14th century, wasn't just a silent killer you read about in dusty textbooks. It had a smell, a thick, complex, almost tangible smell that clung to streets, houses, and people alike. And we're not just talking about something unpleasant. We're talking about an atmosphere so saturated with odors that you could close your eyes and know, without a doubt, that something was terribly wrong. You probably won't survive this, but let's pretend for a moment you can walk through it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're here, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1347. You've stepped off a small merchant ship onto the damp, wooden planks of a bustling port somewhere in southern Europe, maybe Genoa, maybe Messina. The air is alive with the salty tang of the sea and the scent of wet rope, but something else rides the breeze. It's faint, easy to miss at first, like the sour note at the back of your nose when milk turns. Dockworkers shout as they unload barrels of wine and sacks of grain, and for a moment, you think maybe you imagined it, but you haven't. The smell is coming from somewhere deeper in the docks, past the stacked crates and the bobbing fishing boats. Historians still argue whether the plague entered Europe from Crimea by way of Genoese ships or through other ports entirely, but here, in this moment, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that the cargo isn't just goods. It's something alive, something carried in the fleas that hide in the fur of rats, those little stowaways who scurry unseen between barrels. You don't smell the fleas, of course. You smell what follows them. A merchant shuffles past you, his breath warm with the scent of cheap wine and garlic. Behind him, a rat darts across your path, and for some reason, you notice its tail is slick with something damp. You'd laugh about it. Later, it's not all bad odors, yet, in fact, the harbor is still full of the smells. You'd expect tarred holes, fish drying in the sun, fresh bread from a bakery up the street. But here and there, like pockets of rotten fruit in a market stall, are bursts of something else, an earthy, slightly sweet odor that makes your stomach shift. You pass two sailors unloading cloth from a ship, whose sails are patched and stained. The smell coming from inside the cargo hold is unmistakable. Unwashed bodies packed too long in close quarters. You've smelled sweat before, but this is different. It's layered with the metallic temps of fever sweat, that strange, almost coin-like scent. Someone coughs nearby. You turn your head, and the noise of the dock seems too thin. You catch another whiff, thicker now, like meat left out in the sun just long enough to change color. You can't place it, and maybe you don't want to. Of course, no one here knows exactly what's coming. They've heard rumors from the East villages emptied overnight. Strange swellings in the body, a sickness that moves like a shadow over the land, but rumors are easy to dismiss when the sun is bright and the sea smells clean. There's a boy running along the pier, waving to a ship that's slowly being towed in. You see his bare feet slap the wet boards, and, without knowing why, you wonder how many times those feet will touch this dock before the year is over. The ship is sluggish, its crew silent, and as it draws closer, the smell you've been catching, in faint bursts, swells into something undeniable. It's not rot, exactly not yet. It's the smell of fever breaking, of bodies sweating themselves into exhaustion. of clothes that haven't been washed in months. You take a step back, trying to breathe through your mouth, but the breeze shifts and it's suddenly inescapable. Someone behind you mutters about bad air. That's what most people believe causes sickness. The miasma theory. Bad smells mean bad health. So naturally, the locals pull scarves over their noses or crush sprigs of rosemary between their fingers to mask it. It's the first of many futile defenses you'll see. The ship's gangplank creaks into place. You think you see movement in the shadows on deck, not the crisp movements of healthy sailors, but slow, deliberate shapes, like people carrying invisible weights. The first man who steps forward is pale under his sunburn, his eyes glassy. You notice a bruise-colored swelling at the side of his neck before you notice the smell that comes with him, thick, heavy, and wrong. You look away quickly, fixing your eyes on the crates beside you, but the odor hangs there, stubborn. And as you stand on that dock, half turned to leave, half drawn by the strange stillness settling over the crowd, you realize something. The faint tang you smelled when you first arrived was only the beginning. The air of this place is changing, and it's not going to change back anytime soon. The market is alive with noise, but beneath it all there's a smell that seems to rise and fall like an invisible tide. You've wandered a little uphill from the port, following the calls of traders and the promise of bread fresh from the oven. But what greets you is less appetizing. Here, in the open square, rows of stalls huddle together under canvas awnings. The air should be rich with spices, roasted meats, and the sharp green scent of herbs, but instead, it's complicated. On one side, you've got baskets of figs, so ripe they split at the stem, dripping juice onto the wooden planks. On the other, slabs of meat sit on tables without so much as a scrap of ice, their fat softening under the morning sun. Flies treat it like a festival. It's not unusual for a medieval market to smell like this. Hygiene isn't exactly a local specialty, but today it's more intense. A fishmonger has just tipped out a bucket of seawater to rinse his catch, and the runoff snakes toward the gutter in a silver ribbon, carrying with it the pungent tang of scales, brine, and something distinctly off. You can almost taste it in the back of your throat. The crowds don't help. Imagine the scent of 100 unwashed bodies pressed together, each one wrapped in wool that's been worn for weeks without a proper wash. Sweat has soaked into the fibers so deeply that the fabric itself has its own personality, now musky, stubborn, and a little resentful. Historians still argue whether bathing really was as rare as some sources suggest, but you can safely say that in this square, laundry day hasn't happened in a while. You edge past a stall selling onions and leeks, the sharpness momentarily clearing your nose, and overhear a woman bartering for garlic to keep the air clean. She holds a sprig of sage under her chin, breathing through it like a filter. It's a small comfort, and you catch yourself wondering if it works or if it's just the medieval version of chewing gum before a date. There's a butcher at the far end of the row, hacking away at a side of pork. His block is slick with blood, which drips onto the straw at his feet. Normally, the smell would be that raw, coppery scent you expect from fresh meat, but here, it's layered with the faint but unmistakable sweetness of something past its prime. The smell of decay is a slow learner, doesn't arrive all at once, but once it takes hold, it doesn't leave. And then there's the bread stall. For a brief, glorious moment, the air is filled with the nutty warmth of fresh loaves cooling on wooden boards. It's the kind of smell that makes you think of home, no matter where you're from. But even here, it's tainted. The baker's apprentice sets down a basket and wipes his nose on his sleeve. His skin is flushed, and not from the oven heat. You notice the way people give him a bit more space than they give each other. At the center of the square, a group has gathered around a man selling pouches of protective herbs. He shakes a small bag of lavender and thyme, proclaiming that the scent will ward off the pestilence. He waves one at you, grinning through teeth. That could use their own miracle cure. You politely decline, but the smell is pleasant enough to stick in your nose for a few paces. Then the wind shifts. A cart passes, piled high with fish wrapped in burlap. The driver flicks the reins, but the horses are slow to outrun. The stench of whatever's under those sacks. You catch a note of ammonia and rot, and your stomach clenches. Somewhere behind you, a gull screams and lands on the cart, pecking at a corner until a slick tail flops free. The market keeps moving, as if none of this is unusual. And in a way, it isn't. Markets have always been places where good smells and bad ones live side by side. But there's something about today that feels different. The bad smells don't just come and go, they linger, clinging to your clothes, following you into the next street. You can't help but think it's not just the market that's rotting. You step out of the square, grateful for the marginally fresher air of a side alley. But even here, between the stone walls where laundry flaps overhead, the scent of the market lingers, spillage, mixed with sweat herbs, and that faint undercurrent of something you can't yet name. You'll smell it again soon enough. The farther you walk from the market, the more the streets narrow, twisting into lanes that seem to hold the air in place. You're in a residential quarter, now rows of timber-framed houses, leaning just enough toward each other that they almost touch. From above, you'd see a jagged spine of rooftops. From here, you see little but shadow and the occasional sliver of sky. The air here feels thicker, as though it's been used and reused too many times. Every breath brings a mix of smells layered like sediment. There's the smoky tang from hearth fires, the dusty scent of dried rushes underfoot, and something damp like wool left wet too long. Even your own clothes, still clinging to you from the walk, seem to trap the atmosphere. Inside these homes, families cook, sleep, and work all in the same space. Heat from the hearth mixes with the oily smell of stews that have been simmering for hours, sometimes days, because food is too precious to waste. The smell isn't unpleasant, exactly, but it's heavy. It doesn't just touch your senses. It settles into your skin. You pass an open door and glimpse the interior. A single smoky room, a low ceiling darkened with soot, and a straw bed shoved against the wall. The straw is old, flattened, and smells faintly sour. Historians still argue whether medieval straw bedding was changed monthly, yearly, or whenever the fleas complained loud enough. But either way, the scent suggests it's overdue. From somewhere above, a bucket tips and water splashes into the street. You instinctively step aside, but it's not just water, it carries the stale odor of laundry done with lye, mingled with something less wholesome. Chamber pots don't always get emptied discreetly. The street is paved in cobblestones, but between them, dark patches glisten where waste has soaked in. There's a window at head height, its shutter cracked open. You hear coughing inside, a deep rattling cough that seems to pull the air right out of the room. For a moment, you think, you smell fever again, that metallic, coin-like temps beneath the wood smoke. You tell yourself it's just the smoke, but you know better. Children dart past you, their bare feet slapping the stones. They carry sticks with rags tied at the end, pretending to fight dragons, but the rags drag in the mud and pick up whatever's in it. One boy's tunic smells sharply of onions, maybe from helping in the kitchen, maybe from wearing the same shirt all week. A woman steps into the lane ahead of you, shaking a rug with sharp snaps. Dust rises in a golden haze where the light catches it, and with it comes the scent of whatever's been living in the fiber's dog hair. Stale breadcrumbs, maybe a hint of mildew. She doesn't notice you. She's too busy glancing up and down the lane as if expecting someone. From behind another door comes the smell of tallow candles, their acrid smoke mixing with the greasy scent of rendered animal fat. People here can't afford the cleaner beeswax kind. Tallow smoke clings to everything: walls, clothing, even hair. You realize the main difference between the port, the market, and here is that here the smells aren't fleeting. In the open air of the docks, the wind carried things away. In the market, the constant bustle stirred scents into new shapes. But in these homes, the smells settle and stay, seeping into beams, straw, and plaster. Even if no one here ever fell ill, you'd still feel like the air was holding its breath. As you pass a small shrine set into the wall, you catch the faint scent of beeswax. Someone here still has the money or the devotion for clean burning candles. It's a brief reprieve, a reminder that not all smells in this world are heavy. But just beyond the shrine, the lane opens into a tiny courtyard where laundry hangs limp on lines, dripping into puddles that smell faintly of soap and more faintly of something else, something the soap didn't wash away. It's in places like this, where air doesn't move and people live close, that the sickness will find its richest hunting grounds. You can smell the possibility of it already, even if you can't name it yet. You know the moment you cross the threshold that this is a sick room. The air is different, thicker, wetter somehow, like it's been steeped in human breath for too long. The door closes behind you, shutting out the faint street breeze, and you're left with a smell that's both intimate and alien. Someone has tried to fight it. You see bunches of dried herb, sage, rosemary, lavender hanging from the rafters. There's a pot of something boiling gently in the hearth, and the sharp, almost medicinal scent of thyme floats over the room. But the herbs are losing. Beneath them, heavier odors crowd in, sour sweat, stale linens, and that metallic fever tempts you first caught at the docks. The patient lies on a low bed, a pale shape under a blanket that's too heavy for this warmth. Their breath comes in slow, uneven pulls, each one carrying the faint sweetness of sickness. Historians still argue whether that sweetness was from the body's natural processes, breaking down, or from secondary infections that thrived when the immune system gave up. Either way, it's here now, faint but unmistakable. Beside the bed, a small table is crowded with bowls. One holds a vinegar infusion sharp enough to sting your nose. Another contains onions chopped so fine their juice glistens like glass. The caretaker, a thin woman with tired eyes, dips a cloth into the vinegar and wrings it out, laying it across the patient's forehead. It's an old trick meant to cool the humors and cleanse the air, though it works better at masking a smell than curing a disease. You notice the room's windows are shut tight. The miasma theory has its rules. If bad air causes illness, then you keep the outside air away, so the space grows warmer, damper, more oppressive. You can almost hear the walls absorbing it. Somewhere in the corner, a pot of chamomile tea sits, forgotten, the steam carrying a faint apple-like scent that can't quite make it to where you stand. The hearth smoke, the herbs, the sweat, all of it folds together into a single, dense smell that sits in the back of your throat. The caretaker moves with careful efficiency. She changes the linens, not fresh ones, just the least soiled, and tucks the blanket around the patient again. The damp straw mattress gives off a faint ammonia note as she shifts it, and you realize it's been absorbing not just sweat, but worse. In the dim light, you can see where the straw is darker. You're aware, suddenly, of your own breathing. Every inhale feels like it's carrying something invisible, something the herbs can't catch. You glance toward the door, not because you want to leave, but because you know if you stay long enough, the smell will follow you out on your skin and clothes. The patient stirs. Their eyes open briefly, clouded and unfocused, before sliding shut again. The movement dislodges a scent you hadn't noticed before, a faint whiff of pus, sharp and sour. You try to ignore it, but it's there, threading through everything else, and then, almost mercifully, a draft sneaks in when the caretaker goes to fetch more water. It lifts the air just a little, enough to bring you a final burst of rosemary before it settles again. You step back, knowing you'll remember this smell later, even if you never name it aloud. It's the smell of trying to hold back a tide with a handful of herbs. The moment you leave the sick room, you think you're free of it. But as you step into the street, you realize the outside air isn't clean either, it's just a different kind of dirty. The lane opens onto one of the main thoroughfares, where the smells roll toward you like waves breaking on stone. The gutters here run down the center of the street, shallow trenches lined with slippery moss. They're choked with a slurry of everything the neighborhood doesn't want: kitchen scraps, animal dung, spilled ale, and worse. Someone has tossed a bucket of something pale and viscous into the flow. It drifts lazily past, brushing against a cabbage leaf before swirling out of sight. It's not subtle. The stench rises instantly, a ripe blend of ammonia and rot. You'd think people would avoid walking too close, but they stride along unfazed. This is their everyday. A cartwheel splashes through the muck, sending droplets onto the cobblestones, where they'll bake in the sun and join the street's permanent perfume. The houses on either side lean inward, their upper stories shading the road. Laundry lines crisscross above you, dripping onto the crowd. Some drops are just water, some aren't. Historians still argue whether medieval cities had organized street cleaning, or if it was more of a when someone gets fed up arrangement. Either way, it's clear no one has been here recently with a broom or a bucket of lime. You pass a tannery, and the smell changes sharply. Here, animal hides soak in pits of urine and tannin-rich bark, the fumes so strong they seem to reach out and grab the inside of your nose. The workers barely noticed. They've lived in it so long, their sense of smell has probably gone on strike. A few stalls down, a man sells fresh leather goods, the warm, earthy scent of the finished product almost but not quite covering the reality of how it was made. Further along, the air shifts again. A brewer's shop spills the rich, yeasty aroma of ale into the street, mingling with the sweet-sour tints of fermented grain. It's tempting for a second, until you realize the spent mash is dumped straight into the gutter once it's done its job. The smell intensifies, warm and slightly vomit-like in the heat. You catch yourself holding your breath more often now, rationing clean air between assaults. But the street isn't going to give you a break. A wagon passes, its cargo hidden under a heavy tarp. You don't have to see what's underneath to know it's meat. Not fresh, not wrapped, just slabs in the early stages of turning. The driver flicks the reins, the horse plods forward, and the tarp shifts enough to let out a breath of something thick and gamey. Even the animals contribute. Horses leave steaming piles behind them, dogs nose through refuse, cats drag away bits of fish that have seen better days. Every living thing here adds a note to the symphony. At a crossroads, you pause. The main road continues ahead, but to your left, a narrow bridge crosses the city's drainage ditch. The smell from there is different, lower, swampier, as though the water has forgotten how to move. You glance at it and see a sluggish surface patterned with oil slicks, dotted here and there with floating scraps. Whatever's down there has been rotting for longer than you've been alive. And yet life continues. People chat, haggle, laugh. They step over puddles and past waste piles as naturally as you'd step over a crack in the sidewalk. For them, this is normal. For you, the smell is becoming a languageous series of clues telling you more than the sight of the street ever could. By the time you move on, you're not sure what's worse, the individual smells or the way they combine into one heavy, city-wide breath. You hear the cart before you see it, the wooden wheels thumping over cobblestones, the slow creak of its axles. People step aside without being told, their conversations pausing mid-sentence. A dull iron bell swings from the cart's side, its tone low and steady, and then it comes into view. The driver doesn't look at anyone. His face is set, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, as if meeting another gaze would pull him under. The cart's bed is covered with rough linen shrouds, but the outlines beneath are unmistakable slack shapes, unevenly piled. It's the smell that makes your stomach turn before your brain fully catches up. You've caught hints of it before, in the dockyards, the sick room, the market, but here it's concentrated. It's the moment after life leaves a body, when warmth still lingers but the shift has already begun. There's a sweetness to it, almost like overripe fruit, but heavier, more cloying. It wraps around your tongue even when you breathe through your mouth. The horse pulls the cart at a measured pace. Every bump in the road jostles the load, releasing new waves of scent. You notice how quickly the crowd closes in behind it, as if to seal the smell in its wake. Some people turn away, covering their noses with scarves or bunches of herbs. Others just stand and watch, motionless. Historians still argue whether plague victims were always collected by appointed death cart drivers, or if, in many cases, families brought their own dead to burial. What's certain is that once the numbers grew too high, the carts became part of the landscape's slow-moving warnings. You could smell before you could see. The driver stops briefly in front of a narrow doorway. Two men emerge, carrying a shrouded figure between them. They lift it into the cart with practiced hands. There's no ceremony, just the dull thump as it settles into place. You notice the way the linen shifts, revealing the curve of a shoulder, before the driver tugs it back into position. The air around the cart feels heavier now, the scent deepening. You step back, pressing yourself into the shadow of a doorway, but the smell finds you anyway. It's not violent or sharp, it's slow, creeping, insistent. A woman across the street lights a twist of resinous wood and waves it gently, letting the smoke drift over her face. The scent of burning pine and pitch cuts through the air for a moment, offering a brief, almost welcome sting to your nose. But when the wind shifts, the cart reclaims its place. The bell tolls again. The horse moves forward, and the driver calls out, not loudly, not urgently, just enough for those nearby to hear. Bring out your dead. His voice is flat, the kind of tone you use when you've said the same words 100 times in the same day. You follow at a distance for a while, not sure why. Maybe it's the strange gravity the cart has, drawing eyes and holding them. Maybe it's the way the street seems quieter in its presence. The laughter and chatter of market life muted into a respectful, fearful hush. The route winds toward the edge of town. The air changes as you go, losing the tang of the gutters, but gaining something colder. You can see the open fields beyond the wall now, the place where the ground will be turned over again and again until the earth can't tell one burial from another. The cart doesn't stop. The smell doesn't fade. It's the smell of what comes quickly and stays even longer. It's nearly dark by the time you reach the edge of town. The cart rolls toward an open pit, its sides damp where shovels have bitten into the earth. Lanterns flicker along the rim, their light catching on faces that look older than the hours that have passed today. The ground here is raw, the smell rising from it as if the soil itself has been wounded. The air is heavy with 2 layers of scent. The first is the unmistakable sweetness of decabadeus that have gone past stillness and into transformation. The second is the smell of the earth itself, wet and mineral-rich, disturbed after years of rest. Together they form something almost tangible, a fog that doesn't lift with the breeze. A pair of gravediggers stand ankle-deep in the pit. Their boots are caked with mud, so dark it almost swallows the lantern light. One hauls on a rope, guiding the first shrouded figure down into the space below. The linen catches on the edge for a moment, tearing just enough to release another breath of scent into the night air. Historians still argue whether mass graves were a desperate measure from the start, or a grim escalation as the death toll rose, beyond all expectation. Either way, the result is the same. Pits that must be filled quickly, covered quickly, forgotten slowly. You step closer, the damp earth sucking softly at your boots. The smell deepens here, not just the sickly sweet of the dead, but the sharp, acrid tang of lime powder. A boy walks past you, carrying a bucket of it, the dust puffing into the air with each step. They'll scatter it over the bodies before adding another layer of soil, believing it will stop the bad air from escaping. A man near you ties a scrap of cloth over his mouth and nose. You recognize the scent of vinegar soaked into it, the sharpness almost stinging your eyes. Others burn small bundles of juniper or pine, holding them close as if the smoke could shield them. You think of the rosemary in the sick room, the herbs in the market, the resin in the street, different places, same battle. The bell from the cart is silent now. The driver stands apart, leaning on the rail as the pit slowly fills. Every so often, he turns his head as if listening for something beyond the workpert, another cart on the road, perhaps just the wind. One of the gravediggers pauses, wiping his brow with the back of his sleeve. You realize the smell clings to their skin, their clothes, their hair. No amount of herbs will strip it away completely. It's a smell that seeps into you, stays with you, rides home with you long after the work is done. Above, the lanterns sway gently, their smoke mingling with the other scents in the air. The mixture is strange, sweet, bitter, sharp, earthy, and for a moment, it's almost like incense in a place of worship. Almost the last body is lowered, the final layer of lime scattered, and the shovels begin their work. Each scoop of earth brings a fresh burst of the pit's smell before it's tamped down and hidden again. You wonder if it's really hidden, or if it just waits there, breathing slowly under the soil until the next time someone disturbs it. When it's over, the gravediggers stand in silence for a moment before heading back toward the town. The cart creaks after them, its bed empty but still carrying the ghost of its load. You follow at a distance, and with each step, the air seems a little less dense, but the smell doesn't vanish. Not entirely. It lingers, faint but persistent, like the echo of something you'd rather forget but never can. You wake before dawn, though you don't remember sleeping. The smell followed you home, softened, diluted, but still there in the fibers of your clothes and the corners of your mind. You change into fresh garments, fold the others tightly, and leave them outside your door for the washerwoman. But you already know the truth. No washing will ever return them to the scent of clean linen. The streets are quiet, the sky the color of ash. As you walk, you notice shutters drawn tight, doors barred, not just against thieves, but against air itself. Those few awakes move quickly, as if lingering might allow the sickness to notice them. Each breath feels heavier than it should, as if the world itself is reluctant to share its air. A priest passes you, his robe hem-stained dark from last night's rain. In his hand, a brass censer swings, trailing curls of smoke that are almost beautiful in the early light. The smell is heavy with frankincense resinous, sweet but tinged with the faint bitterness of coal. It drifts toward you, momentarily blotting out the other smells clinging to the street. You follow him to the churchyard. Not for prayer, you don't believe that helps, but because you've heard the church has started something new, burning aromatic woods in great fires beside the gates, so anyone passing through the square will be forced to breathe purified air. The fire is already lit, its heart a bed of orange embers. On top, branches of cedar and pine hiss as their sap boils, releasing clouds of pungent smoke. The air here feels thicker, more alive. You inhale, and for a fleeting moment the damp, sick smell seems to shrink away. Not gone, never gone, but pushed back. Others are gathered too. A merchant clutching a handkerchief steeped in wine. A mother holding her child close, the little one's face buried in her shoulder. Two men arguing over whether juniper or sage works better. A dog sniffs at the base of the firewood pile, its nose twitching at the strange mix of scents. The priest murmurs a prayer as he adds more wood. Each crackle is followed by a new wave of smell, woodsy, resin-rich, and slightly sweet. You catch yourself leaning closer, drawn not by faith, but by the thought of escaping, however briefly, the invisible weight pressing on your lungs since yesterday. It's not just the smoke that fills the air here. From a nearby market stall comes the aroma of dried lavender and marjoram, hung in great fragrant bunches to be sold as charms. The seller claims they keep bad air at bay, and judging by the small crowd pressing coins into her hand, many believe it. She wraps each bunch in rough cloth, tying them with string so they can be worn around the neck or hung over a bed. You buy one, not because you think it will save you, but because the scent is sharp and floral, clean in a way that streets are not. You press it to your face as you walk away, the perfume momentarily blotting out the city's deeper smells. Yet as you turn down a narrow alley, the Black Death reminds you it doesn't yield easily. The scent here is close and stale, trapped between high walls where the wind can't reach. It's a blend of rotting scraps, damp timber, and the faint but unmistakable sweetness of decay from somewhere unseen. Your lavender fights it. But the two smells mix into something stranger still, like flowers pressed too long between the pages of a book that was never dry at the far end of the alley. You emerge into a square where a group of men are spraying vinegar onto the cobblestones. They work in silence, the splashes darkening the pale stones, the air thick with the sharp bite of acid. You breathe it in, your nose stinging, your eyes watering, but there's a grim comfort in it. Better the sting of vinegar than the sweetness of the grave. You keep moving. Every turn of the street is a new mixture, a new layer of the city's scent. And you begin to realize that this plague isn't just killing bodies, it's rewriting the smell of the world itself. By midday, the air feels heavier than the sky above. Heat clings low to the streets, and with it, the smells have thickened, less a passing impression now, more like something you have to wade through. Even the stones beneath your feet seem to sweat. You pass a tannery, and for a moment you regret breathing at all. The stench of hides in mid-process is enough to turn your stomach wet. Animal hair, lime, rotting flesh being scraped from leather. Normally you'd cross the street to avoid it, but today the reek isn't just from the tannery. It's layered with something worse. The scent of bodies being prepared for burial in the yard behind. The two smells twist together in the heat, until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. A boy runs past, barefoot, carrying a bundle of herbs so large you can barely see his face behind it. The bundle drips faintly steeped in vinegar, maybe wine. His feet slap the cobbles as he disappears into a side street, leaving behind a momentary wake of crushed rosemary and something bitter you can't name. You stop at a fountain to drink, but the water smells faintly metallic, as if the stone basin itself is sweating iron. A woman next to you sprinkles rose water into her clay cup before sipping. She offers you a drop, saying it will sweeten the mouth. You accept, and for a heartbeat you're reminded of spring. But the sweetness sits strangely in your throat, out of place against the heat and the closeness of the day. Somewhere nearby, bells toll. Not the slow, mournful chime for the dead, but the faster, sharper peal of warning. People look up, exchange brief glances, and move faster. You follow the shifting current of the crowd until you see it, another cart, smaller than yesterday's, drawn by a single mule. The driver wears a waxed leather hood and gloves, and the cart bed is piled with wrapped shapes. This time you notice the difference in smell immediately. It's fresh and newer. Such a word can apply to death. It's the raw, open scent of a wound rather than the deep, honeyed rot of long decay. The driver doesn't stop, doesn't call out. He's headed toward the plague pit beyond the city. Wall and the crowd parts for him without a word. Once he's gone, the air seems strangely empty, and in that space, other smells creep back in the faint burn of pitch from a repair on the wharf, the dusty dryness of brick baking in the sun, the sour reek from a fishmonger's stall where flies move in a shimmering black cloud. You drift toward the river, seeking cooler air. The breeze off the water brings a different set of scents: mud, algae, and the faint mineral temps of stone foundations exposed at low tide. For a moment you think you've escaped the city's worst odors, but then the wind shifts. Somewhere, upstream, a dead animal, dog, goat, you can't tell, has come to rest against the pilings, and the heat has begun its work. The smell drifts down like a shadow. Two boys on the bank are tossing dried sage into a small brazier, fanning the smoke toward the water as if they can push the stench away. You watch them, and in the curling plumes you catch the sharp, dry scent of the herb, almost medicinal, almost hopeful. You realize then that the plague has taught everyone here the same strange truth. Smells can lie. Lavender and vinegar can trick the mind for a moment. Cedar smoke can give you the illusion of safety, and even the sharp tang of sage can make you feel cleaner. But the air always remembers what it carries. You turn away from the river, heading back into the streets. Each corner, each alley, each doorway is another lesson in this new geography of scents unbearable. Some bitter, some so sweet they curdle before you can take your next breath. And you know that when the plague finally passes, if it ever does, you will never walk these streets without smelling today again by late afternoon. The light has turned the color of old parchment golden, but dust thick. The air itself feels slow, as though it's too tired to move, and every scent in the city seems to be sitting closer to the ground, clinging to walls, stones, and people alike. You've begun to notice the way smells have layers, like a painting, scraped back to reveal older strokes beneath. You pass a baker's shop where fresh bread is cooling on wide wooden boards. The warm scent of crust and yeast almost makes you stop almost, but then a draught from the open cellar door spills up, carrying the damp, sour note of grain gone bad. The two smells twist together until neither is pleasant. The baker's apprentice waves a fan of woven reeds over the loaves, not to cool them, but to keep flies from settling. A little further on, you step into a covered arcade lined with stalls, selling cloth and ribbons. Normally, the air here would be scented with wool grease and the faint lanolin temps of sheep. But now it's been overwhelmed by the merchants' desperate defense. They've hung sprigs of juniper, lavender, and marjoram. From every beam, the leaves brushed with vinegar until they glisten. The result is dizzying, sharp, resinous, and wet. The mingling aromas prick your nose, making you sneeze. One stallholder laughs and says, "That means it's working." You don't correct him. Beyond the arcade, the street narrows and turns into shadow. Here the air smells close, as if the day hasn't been able to reach in to burn the damp away. Somewhere ahead, someone is cooking onion sweet, caramelized. With a hint of blackened edge sand, the smell drifts toward you like a warm hand. But just as you're about to step into it, another odor slams into your senses. Human waste, fresh and strong, running in a thin channel down the center of the street. You step aside, nearly colliding with a young man carrying a bundle of candles, so large it hides his face. The warm wax smell follows him, beeswax and tallow mixed, half honeyed, half animal. You remember that candles are burned in homes not just for light but to mask what the air holds. In plague time, even the small act of lighting one feels like drawing a curtain between yourself and the world. At the next corner, you hear it before you see it, the clink of coins and the rustle of pouches. A spice merchant has set up his table. Outside, displaying jars of cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, and pepper as if they were precious stones. People pay more for these than for meat now, believing the spices can warm the body against the cold hand of disease. The merchant encourages them to breathe deeply over the jars, to feed the heart through the nose. You do, just once, and the clove burns in your sinuses like fire. For a moment, the world feels sharper, but sharpness fades. It always does. Farther along, you encounter a narrow alley where the air changes again. Here, the sweetness is so strong. It's almost unbearable, a syrupy, clinging scent that takes you a moment to place. You realize it's from a wine shop, where barrels have burst in the heat and the spilled drink has soaked into the dirt floor. Flies buzz over the dark patches like black lace in the dim light. The shopkeeper stands in the doorway, fanning himself, the smell of souring wine clinging to his clothes like an accusation. You turn away quickly, following a side street toward the sound of water. A public well stands in the square, and women draw buckets hand over hand. The water smells faintly of moss and damp stone, a clean scent by the day's standards. One woman takes a mouthful and swishes it before spitting into the dirt, muttering something about rinsing the bad air. Another woman nearby holds a bunch of mint under her nose, inhaling as though it's her last defense. The sun is sliding lower now, the gold in the air turning to copper. You've learned to read the city's smells like the hours on a clock. Morning was sharper vinegar, wood smoke, cold stone. Midday was heavy leather, rot, stagnant water. But evening brings a strange mixture, the warm comfort of cooking fires, the bitter tang of spent oil, the slow rising breath of everything the day has baked into the ground. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls again. This one is slower, softer another. Funeral. You don't see the procession, but you smell it before you move on. Rosemary, lilies, and the unmistakable undercurrent of a body that's been too long above the earth. And with that, you keep walking, knowing the city's evening will bring a whole new set of scents to endure. From the riverbank, you follow a narrow track that winds back toward the heart of the city. The ground squelches beneath your boots. Every step squeezes up the smell of wet soil, manure, and something faintly metallic like old blood left to rust. The path leads you into the tanner's quarter, where the air is so thick with odor it feels like walking through cloth here. Hides hang from wooden racks like flayed skin, their edges stiff and curling in the sun. Workers move among them with buckets of foul liquor, sloshing the contents onto the hides to soften and preserve them. That liquor is a mixture of dog dung and pigeon droppings, fermented until it's almost alive with bacteria. They smear it in with bare hands, fingers blackened to the nails, the stink clinging to their skin in layers that no washing will ever remove. One man notices you watching and grins, teeth brown and irregular. He gestures to a barrel beside him, where hides soak in a cloudy bath. The surface shivers faintly. You realize it's not the wind, it's maggots writhing in the slurry. He plunges his arm into the mixture without hesitation, pulls up a dripping hide, and slaps it onto the rack. A wet slap, followed by the low sigh of water running off into the dirt, past the tannery. The street narrows to an alley no wider than your shoulders. The walls lean inward, hemming you in, and the light is dim even at midday. It smells of enclosed air-damp plaster, the sourness of cabbage water poured from an upstairs window, and the faint ammonia tamps of human urine drying in the corners. Halfway down, you pass a doorway draped in faded cloth. From inside drifts a different odor, heavy and cloying burnt, rosemary mixed with storax resin. You glance in to see a candlelit room where a woman sits before a brazier, eyes half-lidded. This is an apothecary's wife, burning aromatic resins in the hope they'll keep sickness away. The smoke curls in slow ribbons, turning the air into something syrupy and oppressive. A few doors farther, a boy in ragged hose runs past you carrying a bundle of herb sage, thyme, and marjoram tied together. He's selling them as charms against the plague, shouting their virtues in a voice already breaking. People buy them not for their healing power, but for their smell anything. To cut through the city's constant stink, you emerge from the alley into a small square where a line of open stalls sells fish brought in from the coast, or rather, fish that were brought in from the coast several days ago. The air here is dizzying salt and decay in equal measure. The fishmongers have laid sprigs of lavender and mint between the piles of mackerel and cod, as if flowers could convince you. The flesh is fresh. Flies cloud the air, their bodies glinting in the sunlight. A monger swats them away with a strip of eel skin, sending a thin spray of fish oil into the breeze. At the far end of the square stands a stone well. A woman lowers her bucket and hauls up water with slow, measured effort. When she pours it into a jug, the surface gleams with a faint rainbow sheen. Oil, probably from the tanner's runoff, has made its way here, and yet people drink without complaint. To refuse would be to thirst, and thirst is more immediate than the fear of sickness. From somewhere nearby comes the tolling of a single bell. Not a church bell's lighter, with a sharper ring. A death bell. It means another plague cart is on its way. You follow the sound and see it turn the corner, pulled by a weary mule. The driver sits slouched, face wrapped in a stained cloth. The cart bed is piled high with bodies, loosely covered by a canvas. A sour, sweet smell rises from it, mingling with the scents of fish, herbs, and tanned hide. As the cart passes, storekeepers stop their work, bowing their heads briefly before returning to their tasks. Death is not an interruption. Here it's part of the day's rhythm, as constant as the bells that mark the hours. You stand there for a moment longer, feeling the smells of the square settle into your clothes, your hair, even the back of your throat. When you move on, you know they'll follow you like a shadow. You turn away from the square and follow a street that winds uphill. Its cobbles uneven and slick with a thin film of muck. The incline carries you toward the richer quarter of the city, though richer here only means the odors change from open decay to perfumed attempts at disguise. The air is heavy with scents meant to overwhelm, but instead they mingle into something stranger. Rosewater laced with the ghost of manure, cinnamon drifting over a bass note of stale chamber pots at the first grand doorway. A servant steps out, carrying a silver basin. He pauses only long enough to glance for witnesses before tipping its contents into the gutter. The smell hits you before you see the swirl urine, wine dregs, and the faint musk of spoiled milk. The basin clatters as he ducks back inside. You pass under a row of high windows, from which dangle bundles of dried flowers and herbs marigold, rue, wormwood. The wealthy believe these will cleanse the air as the wind passes through. In truth, the wind only lifts their fragrance and carries it down to mix with the city's constant background odor. Near the crest of the hill, a church looms its doors. Stand open, inviting the faithful to come and pray for deliverance. You step inside, and the first breath you take is thick with beeswax candles, incense, and human closeness. The stone walls trap the scent, holding decades of offerings, footsteps, whispered pleas. Even here, the plague has a presence. In the back corner, a small table holds a stack of perfumed cloths for covering one's nose during services. Outside, again, you skirt around a group of masked physicians. Their beaked masks are stuffed with cloves, myrrh, and mint leaves. The air inside warm and sharp to breathe. A boy trails behind one of them, clutching a pouch of coins, the payment for their visit to his family's home. You can smell the physician before you see him clearly, the herbs in his mask announcing him from several paces away. The road curves, and suddenly you're back. Among gardens, not wild green ones, but ordered plots behind tall walls. Through an open gate you glimpse a manicured lawn and a fountain, the water glimmering in the sun. Yet even here, the scent is not untouched. The breeze carries in the faint tank of smoke from the city below, mingled with the earthy scent of freshly turned soil. A gardener sprinkles rosewater from a bronze vessel onto the petals, and for a moment you breathe in pure sweetness. It doesn't last. A bell begins to toll, again slow, deliberate. This time, the sound comes from behind you, from the hill you've just climbed. You look back and see another cart making its way upward, this one smaller, pulled by a boy no older than 14. The body it carries is wrapped tightly in linen and topped with a small bundle of rosemary. The boy doesn't stop. He pushes past you, his face set in the blank determination of someone who's done this too many times. The smell of the bundle, clean, almost medicinal, lingers as he passes, and you realize it's the most hopeful scent you've smelled all day. You continue down toward the city's edge. The streets widen here, opening to fields that stretch toward the horizon. The air begins to change, not fresh, not clean, but thinner, less oppressive. You can smell grass, dry earth, the faint sweetness of distant hay. Behind you, the city crouches, its smells layered like the stones of its walls, tanneries and plague carts, incense and open drains, fish stalls and rosemary bundles, smoke and sweat. Even as the wind picks up and the countryside scents grow stronger, the city follows you. The smell of it clings not just to your clothes and skin, but somewhere deeper, lodged in your memory. You know that even years from now, a whiff of rosemary, or fish oil, or incense caught on a hot wind will bring this day back to you entire. The sights, the sounds, and above all, the smells of a city living under the shadow of death. You take one last look at the gates, then turn away. The road ahead smells of dust and grass. You breathe in deeply and keep walking. The river stinks before you even reach it. From 2 streets away, the sweet rot of algae tangles with the sharper, sour tang of things long dead. The Thames or Seine, or Arno, doesn't matter which city you're picturing, because in the 14th century, every great river of Europe has turned into the same sluggish, brown ribbon of contagion. The water moves, yes, but too slowly to flush away the human waste. Animal guts, spoiled fish, and laundry runoff that citizens feed into it daily. It is the main water source, the sewer, the fishing spot, and the trash bin all at once. And tonight, you're standing on its bank, pretending you're not breathing through your mouth. A barge glides past, loaded with barrels of wine, or at least barrels of something that started as wine. The men aboard dump bucket after bucket of bilge into the water, making the oily surface ripple. A dog wades in, tongue lapping eagerly, while 2 washerwomen just downstream slap clothes on stones, their knuckles red from cold and soap lye. You can't help but notice the smell clings not only to the riverbank, but to their skin, their aprons, their hair. If you lived here, you'd never escape it. Historians still argue whether medieval river pollution alone could spread plague as efficiently as rats and fleas. But even without the Black Death, this water is already carrying every disease you've ever been told to avoid. You imagine filling a jug for cooking, only to realize the flavor of your stew would forever taste faintly of drowned things. And yet, the river is central to life. Barges bring in grain, ships depart with wool, and water wheels turn millstones that keep bread on tables. The contradiction is everywhere. It's the lifeline and the death line. To hide the stench, people float garlands of herbs or toss in perfumed wood shavings. It works for about 5 minutes until the current carries something swollen and fur-covered your way. You think of a fringe account from a Florentine diarist who swore he saw city guards pour vinegar by the barrel into the river to cleanse it. A noble thought, though probably just turned the water into a tart version of its usual sludge. A fishmonger waves at you from a rickety dock. He's gutting a carp, tossing the innards straight into the current. He offers you a fillet, but your stomach churns. You imagine the moment, weeks from now, when the plague's stench hits the river full force, corpses weighted with stones bobbing just under the surface, as ferrymen steer around them like driftwood. Some children run past, chasing each other, with reeds. They don't notice the smell at all. To them, this is normal. The stink has woven itself into their first memories, the background hum of their city. And you can't help but wonder, maybe the real horror isn't how bad it smells tonight, but how used to it everyone has become. You find yourself inside a tanner's workshop now, though you wish you hadn't. It's not just the smell, the heat, the damp, the animal hides stretched taut on frames like the skin of some great flayed beast. The floor is slick with a mixture of brackish water, hair clippings, and something you hope isn't blood. You were told tanners work on the outskirts of town because no one could bear their stench, but in plague years, with so many empty homes, they've crept closer in, as if no one bothers to protest anymore. A boy, barely in his teens, works a hide over a beam with a dull knife, scraping away the last bits of flesh. Every stroke releases a puff of odor that makes your eyes smart rancid fat, rotting sinew, and something sharp and mineral from the lime pits outside. That's where the hides soak first, submerged in a soupy, chalky bath to loosen the hair. The pits bubble faintly, and a crust forms at the edges, as if the earth itself is trying to seal them off. The master tanner, a man with arms like knotted rope, dunks a finished hide into a vat of water mixed with dog dung. He doesn't flinch. To him, it's as unremarkable as dipping cloth into dye. The dung's enzymes soften the leather, but they also send up a sweet, stomach-turning reek that settles in the back of your throat like a sour cough. He tells you, almost proudly, that they also use pigeon droppings when they can get them easier, to collect in bulk from city roosts. You wonder whether the pigeons have noticed. By the door, an apprentice stirs a smaller vat with a stick. This one is filled with tannin-rich liquid water, boiled with oak bark, chestnut, or sumac leaves. The smell is different, bitter, astringent, almost medicinal. You'd think it would mask the other odors, but instead it blends into a sickly perfume, as if the room can't decide whether to smell alive or dead. Outside, piles of discarded hide. Trimmings attract flies in thick clouds. Dogs slink between the piles, snapping at each other over scraps. Somewhere nearby, a woman shouts for her child to come away. Superstition says the stink of tanning can thin the blood, making you weak against illness. But the truth is, in a city where the plague is already everywhere, no one cares whether tanners spread it or not. Leather is needed for shoes, belts, book covers, and saddles. The work is too important to stop, no matter the smell. You think of monks copying illuminated manuscripts, their hands resting on leather-bound codices that once spent weeks in a dung pit. You wonder if they ever noticed, or if centuries of scraping, boiling, and soaking had finally stripped the last trace of stink from the skin. The boy looks up at you and grins, oblivious to the tears forming in your eyes. He's grown up with this scent in his clothes, his hair, his dreams. To him, this is not foul, it's the smell of bread on the table, of work done right, and maybe that's the strangest thing you've learnt so far, in a world steeped in death. Survival smells worse than dying. The river should be a place of relief, a strip of moving water to carry away the filth of the city. But as you walk down the muddy bank, you realize the river is not an escape, it's a repository. The current runs sluggish, dragging with it a floating skin of scum and waste. Bits of straw, orange peel, dead rats, and clots of something unrecognizable bob lazily past. You crouch near a washerwoman pounding a bundle of linens against a flat rock. She glances up at you briefly, then keeps working, splattering herself with droplets from the river. You know those linens belonged to plague victims there, being purified here before resale or reuse. She's been told that the river will cleanse them, that the running water will carry away the sickness. You can't decide whether it's faith or desperation that keeps her believing. Farther downstream, a man stands thigh deep in the water, stirring a great wooden frame strung with netting. He's a fuller, working wool cloth to thicken it. But instead of using clean water, he stirs the cloth in a slurry of clay, urine, and soapwort, letting the filth seep into the fibers before the rinsing stage. The smell that rises when he lifts. The sodden cloth is thick and sour, it sticks to your tongue like bad wine at the bend in the river. The tannery's outflow gushes into the current, sending up an oily sheen. The stink rides the wind before you even reach it. Dog dung, lime water, and rawhide fat mingled with the wet, mossy smell of riverbank. Nearby, children squat at the edge, dangling their feet into the water as if it were nothing more than a warm summer pond. They throw stones and laugh, their voices cutting bright through the murk. But not far from them, two men in ragged tunics haul something heavy to the water's edge. You think at first it's a sack of stones, but then the cloth shifts and a pale arm slips free. They exchange no words. One man pushes the bundle into the current while the other watches. The river takes it slowly, the shape rolling once before. Sinking, the stench here is more than just rot, it's the smell of surrender. Every drop of water is a mingling of life and decay, laundry and corpses, fish and filth. There is no clean and unclean, only the churn of it all together, you think. Of the city's wells, some fed directly by this water. People draw up bucket after bucket, convinced that if it comes from the earth, it must be pure. And perhaps they're right in thinking there are worse things than drinking the river after all. The plague travels faster through the air than through a cup as you stand there. A breeze comes off the water and carries the scent of wet reeds, mud, and faintly. The spice of a barge passing upstream. Its cargo is cloves and cinnamon, meant for the houses of the wealthy. For a moment, the sweetness almost masks the decay, like a ribbon tied around a wound. But then the wind shifts, and the truth of the river returns, heavy and undeniable. The washerwoman pauses in her work to wring out the last of the water. She lays the linen flat on the grass, as if it were clean. And you realize this is the closest thing to cleansing this city will ever know.